like to drive. I was a police officer, so we used to work 410s. So I'm used to being in a car for 10-hour shifts at a time. So driving to me is just second nature. But as Christina said, my name is Christine Villaverde. I'm running for Congress for this district. As it is now, obviously they're going to be redrawing the map, so we're not exactly sure what the map situation is going to look like. It could be another couple months before all of that, settles down. A little bit about me. I was raised in a military family. My father's retired Air Force, Vietnam veteran. I was an Army wife for 16 years, so I know firsthand the sacrifices that our men and women and their families make every single day. Making sure that this nation is safe and secure. I was also a police officer. While my husband was in the Army, we were stationed in Arizona, and I decided to take that leap of faith. I'd always wanted to be a police officer. It was very hard as in a military family, being a supportive spouse, becoming a police officer, but I applied to the Avondale Police Department. At the time, it was extremely difficult to become a police officer. There was a waiting list a mile long, not like it is nowadays. It used to be an honorable profession where, law enforcement officers were revered and they were applauded for, putting their lives on the line and, dedicating, their lives to the service of their community. I had the privilege of serving with so many wonderful men and women in a border town, and I saw back then firsthand how bad it was in these border towns. And this is when we had a halfway decent, secure border. I can't even imagine what it is right now, not having border security at all. In North Carolina, my family all remained here, so I ended up moving back here because this is where my family's at. My father retired here. All my siblings are here, cousins, aunts, uncles, everybody's here. I had the honor of serving with the judicial branch with Chief Justice Paul Newby. I was the judicial branch emergency manager. So I'm trained in continuity of operations, protecting critical infrastructure. I have firsthand policy experience with the judicial branch, actually creating policy to keep our facilities across the entire state safe. I had to create policies while working with, as you can imagine, across the aisle with sheriffs, county managers, county commissioners, with Governor Cooper during COVID. So I had to work with Democrats who definitely did not see things our way. They wanted to keep everything shut down, and as you all know, in the judicial branch, timely adjudication of people's problems in our court system is of the essence. I mean, we had people that were waiting months to get, protection orders, to see their children, to have judgments against their property. We saw how the president decided single-handedly he was just going to take people's properties away from them and said, sorry, you can't kick people out because it's a national health emergency, and people literally had their homes stolen from them and they had no redress. And that's what happened in the state of North Carolina, also under Governor Cooper. So my training and experience, I think, is very relevant for my running for Congress. I have that boots on the ground experience, not only protecting local communities, but at the state level, and also creating policies to protect people's lives and protect people's property. I also have a master's degree in public policy from Liberty University. So not only do I have the experience on the ground, but I also have the education, training through FEMA, training through Homeland Security that I can take on day one to DC and actually enact policies that will help people, help people's lives. Right now we're seeing suffering across the board, not only in eastern North Carolina, but all across the United States, because Biden has decided that his edicts overrule the Constitution. And what is that? We have the Constitution for a reason. It's the It's the safeguard. It's the roadmap that we're supposed to all follow by. And he just decides unilaterally, well, I'm just going to go ahead and do it, and I'm going to wait for the courts to come back and tell me I can't do that. We have never seen that happen in the United States, but we're also seeing that with Governor Cooper. We're seeing, by just saying that this crisis overrules the Constitution, and we have to be able to rein that back in. We have to have leaders that have the experience, have the education, have the knowledge that they can actually take to DC, and on day one start reining in this out of control presidency, because we all know that they just are just throwing stuff out there, and they're seeing what's going to stick, and they're waiting on the rest of us to speak up. Well, right now the left has been louder than the rest of us. Mm-hmm. And it's going to take the rest of us to say enough is enough, because I guarantee you the majority is us. We've been that silent majority for too long, and it's going to take true leadership that has the skills and the abilities and the boots on the ground, and that knowledge to go to DC. I'm also a wife, and I'm a mother of 3 boys, and people always ask me, you have three boys, you're busy, you're a career woman. I have twin 6-year-olds that I'm also homeschooling right now, because I just do not trust what administrators and teachers are going to teach my children. I know that they're going to get a quality education at home with me, and that's something that we should not ever have to worry about as taxpayers. We pay for our children to get a quality education that's not an indoctrination camp. We want to make sure that our children are provided the same opportunities that the rest of us grew up with. With my older son, he's in college right now, I never once imagined that some of the information that's being taught in school, I didn't know. And even back then, now he's been telling me, yeah, they were talking about a lot of these things 10 years ago. Most of us didn't know that. COVID really opened our eyes as parents to what was going on. We just assumed that teachers and administrators had our children's best interest at heart. And that's just not the case. So as a mother, I'm running for Congress because I want this country to be the same country with the same opportunities, the same safety, the same prosperity, the same, just the same pride in country that we all had the privilege to grow up in. And right now, our children are not given that same opportunity that we all had. They're just not. And it's up to every single one of us to claw that back. Because let me tell you what, we're not looking down into the abyss. We are in that abyss. We have been blindfolded for too long. We did not know what was going on. And now we've all had our eyes opened. COVID opened our eyes. And we've all seen what the left has slowly been driving us for. That pendulum has swung to the left so far that it's going to take every single one of us to not only make the choice to be here, but to serve in whatever capacity we all are, and to fight and make sure that we get this country back that we all had the opportunity to grow up in. Because it's just not the same country. It's just not. And that's sad. We can make a difference though. It's just going to take all of us to come together, and we all need to unify. Right now we're kind of fractured, and the left is taking advantage of that. Mm-hmm. We need to have strong leaders with strong voices, with experience, and that has that forward vision. The past sucked, don't get me wrong. Don't even get me on election integrity. Mm-hmm. But it is what it is. You can't unring the bell. You can't live in the past. What we need is that vision forward, and we need leaders that actually they can bring something to the table with solutions. We need people that are forward, innovators, that have solutions to bring to the table, say enough is enough. we're not going to do this anymore. We're going to get the country back that we all love. We love this country. We're the best country in the world. We're the most giving country, the most compassionate country. I mean, just look at how much we do for every other country around the world. And we have leaders that are saying that we're inherently racist and we're horrible people. That's coming from our own government. We have never had that before, when our own government said that the people in the United States were racist and horrible, and that we need to get rid of the Constitution and do it over because it's not good enough. That's not true. It is good enough. We are good enough. We all made a choice to be here tonight. We all made a choice to say that we need leadership, and we need vision, and we need innovation, and we need solutions to get this country back to where we all know that it should be and can be again. Because the best days are ahead of us, and our children are watching and they're depending on us. Thank you so much for allowing me to speak to you tonight. Does anybody have any questions?
Do you have a card or any pamphlets to hand out?
I do.
Okay.
I'll give you a card afterward.
I have a question. Because you're going to be primary with Sandy Smith, can you give us some differences in your philosophies between the two of you?
She owns a frying pan.
Well,
Sorry.
to me, as a former police officer, I can't even tell you how many times that I went to domestic violence calls, and I've seen people's lives destroyed. I've seen atrocities committed upon children and women and men. And to me, she should have not made light of that. I don't think joking about domestic violence is ever the right thing to do. If there were issues about her background, she should have addressed those instead of the frying pan. For me, as a police officer, seeing children's lives destroyed, I've seen some horrible incidents, and to me, it's just not a joking matter. So that's just not something I would ever joke about. I just don't think it's in that situation. Nobody's perfect. Nobody in this room is perfect. We've all made mistakes, but you should address that kind of situation, especially in a more serious manner.
As far as policy,
I'm definitely America first. My whole agenda would be based upon what is in the interest of America and American citizens. I know a lot about geopolitical strategizing. Obviously, we've been seeing Ukraine just throwing money at that left and right. Obviously, we don't want somebody just running rampant across Europe, but we need to have Congress come in. Congress is supposed to control the purse strings, and they've not had a chance to actually analyze what kind of money is going out the door and where it's going. There's no oversight, and we need to bring that back in. I'm more worried about about Taiwan and the Taiwanese Strait and China. I think that's going to be where we're going to have a lot of issues moving forward, because China's not going away, and they are doing everything that they can to take all of our secrets. They're getting secrets through colleges and universities. They're stealing our intellectual property, and I mean, you're seeing the issue with TikTok right now. I don't think we have an answer for China yet.
Our president made light of that in the Oval Office. Made a joke.
He makes jokes about everything. I mean, yesterday about the shooting.
Oh my God.
He's talking about ice cream. What is this?
What concerns me is our future generation. We see this generation now, the violence, the confusion, the gender identity confusion. We've lost patriotism, we've lost values, we've lost our ethics, we've lost respect from other countries. They look at us and we're laughing stocks. What about the Department of Education and our children, since you have two small ones?
And language and how we proceed with what we call, especially women, language is at the cornerstone of civilization and culture. You know, they're always, on the left, are always saying, you know, the Republicans are in this culture war. Well, yes, we're in a culture war, because culture is what drives policy. If they can drive policy based upon a radical socialist Marxist culture, then we're going to go down that slippery slope away from a representative democracy like we have. You know, they're already pushing towards that, where they just want these huge social safety nets, but they don't have the money to pay for it. You know, they just want the Fed to continue to print money that we don't have, and we're bankrupting our children's future. So, you know, when they say, oh, you know, you see it on CNN and MSNBC all the time that the left is just worried about these culture wars. Well, yes, because it's all about culture. Culture drives policies. What mainstream America is worried about, that's what gets the attention on Capitol Hill. That's when they start creating policies, like you've been seeing with the transgender issues. We've seen, who 10 years ago knew
Would have
anything
ever thought.
about, nobody was transitioning, nobody was giving 7-year-olds puberty blockers. That's brand new, because it's now part of culture and mainstream media, and they're pushing it in that direction. It's all what children are seeing on TikTok and on TV, and teachers are talking about. I mean, you see these liberal teachers that have, you know, the gay pride flags and, you know, the books in libraries, and then, you know, the left just says, you know, we're book banning, and obviously we don't want to ban educational material, but as a Christian conservative mother, it is, you know, this kind of stuff is totally opposite of what I want my children to learn. They, at 6 years old, kindergarten, they don't need to know all of these radical sexual identities. It's just going to confuse them. But then you hear the left say, well, you push on them, you know, heterosexual couples with mom and dad. And I'm like, because that's biology. You know, that's how you procreate the species, with a biological male and a biological female. That's how you continue civilization as we know it. So of course, that's what we're going to teach our children. So if you're teaching our children something other than that, then parents should absolutely have the right to know what's being taught in school. Absolutely. Yes.
I think I'll just be blunt. I've heard a lot of this kind of stuff numerous times. The Republican Party has been in control of both houses of Congress, and twice at least had a Republican president, and have done absolutely nothing to reverse any of these things that the Democrats have put in that have gone liberal. What are you going to do to help get that done, to actually get some changes in place?
And I know Trump started rolling back a lot of that, especially like the DOD and our military.
I'll give him credit for that, yes,
Yeah,
he did.
he started to try,
But the Congress did not back him.
and Congress did not back him.
So what are you going to do that would help Congress to back him?
I would fight tooth and nail to pass legislation. I mean, we just saw the Parents' Rights Act that they passed without not a single Democrat voting, and that's just common sense that parents should know what's in the curriculum. And then, you know, you hear them saying that, you know, well, parents are just, you know, a few are going to, you know, up the different school board meetings and speaking up, and typically you're only going to have a couple people that speak up, because the rest have been subdued into silence because they're so intimidated, because the left just gets violent. We just can no longer cow down. For me, it's not about money, and a lot of it's about lobbyists. So you have some of the lobbyists in Congress that go to certain individuals and say, hey, just put this aside and, you know, give money to your campaign. I don't really care about any of that stuff. You know, as long as I have healthy children, you know, a loving family, you know, I didn't get into law enforcement to become rich. As long as I have a truck that gets me from point A to point B and I have a nice house, I don't care about the rest of that stuff. Obviously, you have to get reelected so you can keep making positive, impactful changes. But the lobbyists, if they come at me for something that's totally opposite of my core values, then I don't want anything to do with it. For me, it's about honor, integrity, and I know a lot of people use those as punchlines, and to me, that's not it. You know, I was raised in a military family to believe that honor, integrity, service to others was, you know, why I was put on this planet, to help other people who could not help themselves. And if I cow down to the pressures, then I'm not true to myself, and at the end of the day, God is the only one that I'm, you know, I have to be positioned well with. You know, God is my judgment. And at the end of the day, the worldly riches are not worth my honor, my integrity, and my morals and my convictions. So I will fight for those values that I believe are central to what this nation was founded upon. And that's and most of that is the core family. You know, mother, father, children, sense of community, belonging to a community, helping each other up. You know, we didn't always have this huge government that was in our lives. You know, the little tendrils are coming into every single aspect of our lives, controlling everything from, you know, from A to Z. And that's not the way the government is supposed to be. You know, the government has one core tenet, and that is to protect our safety. And they're failing on that front, you know, in our communities, you know, in our state, on our border. Geopolitically, they're failing.
The previous young man who walked in and he was frisked and he still killed 2 people in the school, I can't even remember where that one was, it's like weekly now. And they mentioned that he had to be frisked. They had a plan for him. And I ran into this about 28 years ago when my son was in 3rd grade. I was in his school at Northside Elementary right out here, and there was a woman sitting beside a child. And I was there for most of the morning, and finally I asked the teacher, you know, what was going on. And the state, federal money paid for this woman to sit beside this child. And I found out a little bit more 2 years later when he attacked my child coming in off the playground. He was much taller than my son, and he was behind him walking in off the playground, and he picked Matthew up, turned him upside down, and dropped him on his head. Matt did not tell anyone. A friend saw it and told the teacher, and they set him down. They told me to come get him, but they didn't tell me what happened. I found out that night when the teacher called me checking on it. Of course, I'm ballistic at this point. And so I knew the principal, we were friends, she was a client of mine, and I went to talk to her, and this is what they said: we are legally required to teach this child. And I said, you're legally required to protect my child, but teaching that child is more important than keeping our children safe. And they even mentioned when they were talking about this young man that he was on a plan, and a lot of students seem to be on plans where they may have people sitting beside him. This particular child is now homeless in Newland. In 5th grade, he hurt Matt. In the 7th grade, he burnt down a neighbor's shed. And it said the social workers practically lived with the family. Both parents were drug addicts, and it wasn't his fault. He was born, and his electrical circuits didn't work right. But he was never going to be a contributor to society. And yet, how much money was spent on someone every day sitting beside him to be sure he didn't harm himself or somebody else? And then when he does, oh well, they don't want you to know about it. And it appalled me when I heard that. How many of these children are under plans like that, where they, you know, I mean, obviously the teachers know, but the parents don't.
And
It's a walking time bomb.
we see that every single day, where instead of creating actual plans that address mental health, that circumstances are actually creating environments that's worse for them. Because the parents want them to have like a
Mainstream.
typical,
Yeah.
but, and it's sad because that person takes precedent over the other typical students, and then those other typical students are put at risk. And like you said,
Possibly 10
never
years
know about
after
it.
they, you know, several years after this child left the school, they're still coming back to do that.
My older son was the same way. He was in high school in a shop class, and there was somebody there that was under a plan, and he had been arrested several times for assaults at the school, unbeknownst to any of us. And he took like some sort of tool, he had gotten it really hot, and came over to my son's arm and burned him. And the school never told me anything about it.
No, they don't
I
want
saw
you to
2
know.
days later that he had a burn mark. I'm like, what happened there? And I was talking about livid. I mean, I was ready to go.
And how long
You
has
know.
this been going on? My son is, gonna be
And
37
I had
this
to
year.
go initiate, criminal proceedings to have him charged with assault, because how many other times did he get away with that? And how many other students did he hurt or, potentially maim?
And how many times do the students, because Matthew didn't tell me when
And
I
they-
got home that
Because
what had
they
happened.
don't
don't wanna
want
tell.
to be the narc.
So do the schools get state or federal funds for every child under a plan?
Probably.
Because they wanted to put my child on a plan because he was ADHD.
Mhm.
But he's a straight A student, never was in trouble, never was a bully, none of that. And they
ADHD,
still wanted to put him on a plan.
ADHD's, I mean, these children are dangerous.
Right, but I mean, they still wanted to
It's
put
a
my
different-
child on a
Different
plan.
plan.
Different
Yeah,
plan.
they
It's an
have
I-
it,
Okay.
it's like an IEP.
yeah.
Well, they gave him an IEP.
Okay. Yeah.
But I didn't want him under the IEP because he
mean-
didn't need additional supervision by teachers.
I'm sure they get extra resources for students that need the extra help.
Well, they get the federal funding, the
Mhm.
federal
Funds.
cards that you fill out, or at least up in Norfolk when I worked for Norfolk Public Schools. And I saw what you're saying a lot of times, because the kids didn't want to be in class, they couldn't be in class because they were disruptive.
Yep.
But they would not leave the building because there was nothing to go home to.
Mhm.
Mom was walking the streets and dad was nowhere to be found, and there was drugs, and even the parents acted up when they came into the building to even talk to a staff member. And staff members were actually chastised for trying to toe a line and keep everything in order by not only administration but by the parents. And I got out of the school system when it was awful. It was
Several
awful.
years after that, a friend of mine was principal at Northside, and my mother had a radio scanner, and she called me over and she says, you need to know what's going on at Northside. Matthew was at middle school by this time, and they had a child there who just went ballistic, and they had duct taped him to a chair.
Oh,
And when EMS got there, they said, we're not coming in the building until you release that child, because they could have faced criminal
I
charges.
did in-school
But-
suspension,
but
and it was,
Teachers aren't prepared to handle
No.
that.
And that goes to the point of school choice.
yeah.
So as parents and taxpayers, I think as parents, we should be the final arbiter of what is going to be right for our unique children, because public school's not going to be right for every child. There's magnet schools and there's Christian schools, and there should be that opportunity that parents can make those decisions that best fits
And
their
you know
unique
what's
child.
happening now, because we do have some school choice in North Carolina.
Mhm.
And to my understanding, what's happening is when a child gets thrown out of public school, the money is there to send them to a private school or a Christian school. And until they get thrown out there, they make the rounds.
But should you have to wait till your kid gets thrown out? Or
Well-
should you, as a taxpayer, decide that this school over here is better than this school over here, and you
I
don't
was
have to
able to
wait for
choose
something
when
to go wrong.
When we moved, we changed school districts, and I had to go to the school board every year and sign a thing saying I would provide his own lunch, I would provide transportation to and from
He
school.
couldn't eat at the school.
And I had to provide it, they wouldn't
So
give
were
him-
you, is that here?
Yeah,
Were you within Pasquotank County or?
yep, they wanted him at Pasquotank High and I wanted him to stay at Northeastern.
And they wouldn't feed him if you?
I had to provide his
And then
needs.
if you have school
Whoa.
choice, now you
I did
have an
transportation
open
with
market.
food.
So will not that encourage public schools to raise the bar? Because now they know they have to provide a better service in order to get the taxpayer money
No,
that
the
they were
county's gonna
getting.
give them anything they ask
Yeah.
for.
So, but if they start losing students, because you get,
We
The
are
amount
already
of
down
money.
1,500 students
so if you keep
over the
losing
last 5
students,
years.
so we need to come up with a better solution that is going to actually provide
Yes.
a quality education for our children. Because we have steered so far away from what the core tenet of our educational system is supposed to be, and that's to provide our children with a quality education so that they can go out into the world and be a contributing member of society, to get a good paying job or whatever, whatever that happens to be. Not necessarily go to college, because there's plenty of trades out there that are great. My husband's, he's a mechanical engineer. He ended up going to college, after the fact, but there's so many trades out there that are great jobs, and people are being steered towards colleges because that's what they've always believed that they had to do to get good jobs. But literally, plumbers, electricians, HVAC
By the way,
people.
my nephew's a plumber now.
Oh my God! You can make your own way.
He's
You
happy.
can make bank
Good money.
and
Yes.
great money, and you don't come out of college being saddled with $100,000 in debt. You're working right away, and you're creating something with your hands, and you have a lasting impact on your community, and you're helping your community. You're building something. And I think we've been doing a disservice to our kids by saying that the only way forward is to go to college and get whatever
Indoctrinated.
coding or something. How about you go to a technical
Good
college and you
education.
learn welding?
Yeah.
It is amazing how much money you can make as a
My father
welder.
was a right,
It's
iron
crazy.
worker, welder, yeah.
And I mean, it's great pay. It's you're not in a cushy office with your feet up, but it is guaranteed income for a long time. I mean, the jobs are out there, and the jobs are not going away. We're seeing the tech sector where the jobs are going away, and those sectors that we've been pushing for college education. And we need to say that college is not for all of our kids, but we still need to prepare them in our public schools, or we need to provide them an opportunity, to go to a Christian school or a magnet
Christian over
school
here.
or.
My question to you is, when they get this redistricting, where do you stand there?
What do you mean?
Will you still represent Northeastern North Carolina, or will your district, will it change?
I honestly don't know. I think the first district is gonna stay pretty similar to what it is now. That is one district that is not gonna change a lot. I would assume, don't quote me on it, but I would assume they're gonna pick up the maps that they had prior to the Supreme Court coming in and kicking them out. So it's gonna stay pretty similar to what it is. They can't change the first that much. I would think maybe the 13th, which is like the Johnston County area, and Wake County is gonna change a little bit more because they're trying to dilute Wake County because it's so blue. But the first has been leaning more red.
Well, we were in the third before they changed this to first, so how are they gonna collide?
I don't know what they're gonna do. And until.
Will they combine the first and third, or will they still be separated?
No, I mean, they still have to have, you have to have 14
Okay.
distinct districts.
Districts.
So because of the census, we picked up that 14th.
Yes, I knew that.
I don't know exactly what it's gonna look like, but I still think the first is gonna be geographically similar to what it is. It's gonna be a large district still. And I think it's gonna be pretty much what we see now. I know the other map before didn't have Pitt County in it. Greene, I don't think was in it. I think it had Wayne in it, where it doesn't now, Goldsboro. So you might see a few changes, but I think it's gonna be pretty similar to what it is now. But there's no guarantee.
Let's say that today was election day and you've won and this is your victory speech tonight. What do you go do tomorrow morning? What's the first thing you run and do after you're elected?
For the general election?
Yes.
No, I've already prepared legislation that on day one, as soon as I'm sworn in, I want to enact. A lot of that's protecting critical infrastructure. For me, like I said, I'm trained through FEMA and Homeland Security to protect our critical infrastructure, continuity of operation that's so huge. Right now, our adversaries know that we are vulnerable in our electrical grids, our water, our ports, our airports. We're sitting ducks if they want to take out an electrical grid, because where do we have to go to get these replacement electrical components? China. You know how long it takes on a slow boat from China to get just basic transformers over here? Months. So what do we do in the meantime when our entire eastern seaboard is like that?
Same with the pharmaceutical compounds. We
can't get
dangerous is
antibiotics
that?
for our children. How sad, what is this
Baby formula.
assault on our children?
Yeah.
We can't get acetaminophen, I couldn't get Tylenol, I couldn't get cold medicine for my twin 6-year-olds. You know, they were limiting, you know, what you could get at Walgreens. I'm like, I have two kids that need this medication, and I'm sorry, you know, you can only get, you know, one Tylenol at a time. You know how quickly twin 6-year-olds go through Tylenol when they have a fever? I'm like, and that's something that you're talking about as a parent. You know, your children's lives are at stake. I can't imagine when I breastfed both of my twins, but I had to supplement with twins. I can't imagine what I would have done if I couldn't have got formula, because I had one that was on a specialty formula because he had gastric issues, so he would throw it up. So I had to get the specialty, and I saw that you couldn't get that for your children. So in the United States of America, the greatest country in the world, the strongest economy, you cannot feed your babies? What does that say?
That we put our livelihood in the hands of an adversary.
And why have we done that? Why have we
Because we're
outsourced everything?
We
didn't do nothing but
Antibiotics.
people in there we trust.
Obviously, there was a plan. I don't think it's coincidence.
And that
No.
plan is not to the benefit of the American population.
It came out
It's to
today.
everybody else except for you and I. You know, they just look at us as expendable sheep. You know, there's so many Americans, you know, we're all taxpayers. What could we all possibly do? So that's where we need representation that's gonna step up and say, enough is enough.
Would you be willing to push legislation that would prohibit foreign countries buying land
Oh,
or
yeah.
businesses?
They're already
in the
pushing
United
that.
States?
Thomas
Yeah.
Massey,
Yeah.
they're trying to push that where, yeah, you can at least reduce, if not
Yeah.
eliminate, how much farmland. Because how do you control a population? Through their food.
Yeah.
Not even farmland. I
And
don't think
water.
it should own anything.
And water.
Other countries don't allow it.
Speaking of that also, our secretary and I yesterday were reviewing a list of companies in the United States that China has recently purchased. And we could not believe, I mean, vacuum cleaner companies, computer companies, car companies, and the one thing they seem to all have in common are companies that would have semiconductors or electronic components. So it would appear that China has made a very concerted effort to get hold of all of these components and buy up all the companies that need these components to continue to make their products. Is there anything legislation-wise that you can do to prevent foreign companies from, foreign countries from
Yes.
purchasing these things?
And it's not just the United States, which is really scary. They have the silk, and they have this initiative where they have these predatory lending practices where around the globe they are purchasing ports, farmland, strategic areas of importance, Marshall Islands, places that are unheard of, that we would have an adversary that close to mainland South America. They're building ports that they can strategically around the world just choke off, shipping lanes, and buy, like you said, components where we will be vulnerable to asking them for certain, like you said, cobalt and different things that are going into these semiconductors that our government says we can't mine here. We have to go to China to get them to mine for them. Even though we have these elements in the United States, we are prohibited by whatever EPA, whatever,
Regulations.
all these regulations, we are regulated out the you-know-what. And we cannot ourselves provide our own industries for these components. And so we are dependent upon our enemies. And that is not where you want to be as supposedly the world superpower. Right now we are beholden to these other countries for components for semiconductors and for fuel.
So my question to you is, Sandy Smith has run. Why are you primarying her and running against her? Why? What makes you better than Sandy?
I think that with my skills, my abilities, my education, I can on day one take my legislation that I have already prepared, that I already know will help protect communities, to protect the United States, to move forward, to be a stronger nation. I know that I have those abilities to go forward and do that, whereas I don't think anybody else running against me has the education or the boots on the ground experience. I've lived my life in public service. I've already shown that, I've been willing to put literally myself on the line to protect people who cannot protect themselves. And I know that I can best serve this state and this country in Congress.
Actually makes a lot of sense.
Yes.
We are $30 trillion in debt. My great-grandchildren are mortgaged.
Mm-hmm.
As a veteran, I am concerned that every single day we spend $2,000 million on our military. Can we afford that? Do we need 13 and a half aircraft carriers where 150 countries in the world have none?
That's because they're using.
I
ours.
realize this is a sacred cow
I know.
and Republicans don't want to touch it. Can we afford it?
The only thing you have to look
Stir it
at,
up.
the only thing you have to look at is China is on the march.
Yep.
And they are outpacing us 10-1 with their military strength. Pretty soon they're gonna outperform us on the seas. So strategically speaking, Taiwan I think is going to be that next issue where they're going after Taiwan. It's just a strategic area that they're going to want to control. And our Navy right now is not ready. That being said, the military-industrial complex needs to be smarter about innovating and where they put their money, and
You would control that.
Yes.
Congress controls that.
Congress kind of. I mean, obviously, we keep seeing Biden just throwing money out the door with no oversight. So we need to rein that back in and actually say, what money is being spent? Where is it being spent? Is this money being spent strategically to beef up the military where we need it to be beefed up? Is it going to our Navy? Is it going to, our fighter pilots? Or is it just going to this woke crap that we're seeing?
Woke crap.
Diversity, equity, inclusion.
Yeah.
They're spending millions of dollars on these
Sensitivity
DEI
training.
thing. So we need to overhaul where the money is actually being spent and make sure that it's being spent wisely. And this is where auditing, I think the past decade, the military's failed their audits. So we don't actually know what the military is spending their money on because Congress has abdicated their role of oversight. And yes, the Republicans have done it in the past as well, because they've always been seen as the big supporter of the military. We want a strong military, obviously. We don't want to be stretched thin. We want to be available. We want to have the strongest military, the best fighting forces, the most capable, but we're not paying people what they should be paid. They're not getting the support they need to support. So we need to see where the money's actually going and make sure that where the money's going is invested wisely for the future.
Are we investing wisely in Ukraine?
No.
That is the question of the day, isn't it? So is Putin gonna advance? Do we need to keep throwing money there without having oversight? I think we need to have oversight. We need to see where this money's going. How is it being spent? We see,
And we afford to spend it. We're depleting our resources, our military resources.
I know, because our own armaments are being drastically reduced. So what happens if tomorrow we need to send, we've seen some of our bases in Iran where we've seen people that are, starting conflicts over there. So we can't be short-sighted and just say that all of our attention's on Ukraine, because that's not the way the world works. Geopolitically, it is a globe. And there's always going to be containment issues around the globe that we have to have our finger on the pulse. And I don't think the government right now, the Biden administration, has any idea.
Mhm.
They're just so laser focused on Ukraine.
Well, we thought they were corrupt before the war, and now we're just throwing money at them here. Corrupt people, take it.
Well, my concern is they had an opportunity to join NATO prior to this. What does this say when we support them and they didn't join? Only when the boogeyman was at the door.
We have all these other countries in Europe that always just assumes we're going to pick up the tab.
Exactly.
That our blood and
Yes.
treasure of the United States, they're the big guy on the block. Let them handle it. Well, enough is enough. We want other people to actually stand up with us, our allies, to stand up with us.
Our military recruitment numbers are way down. Would you support reenacting the draft?
I don't think we're at that point yet.
We're gonna head that direction the way we're going though.
If we get into an adversarial conflict with China,
You're gonna have a big problem there, because you're gonna have to get people to do that back in, I remember the
Oh, I
day.
remember, yeah.
You're gonna have to give them something that they've always taken, they're taking away their benefits, you're gonna have to give all them things away, that's gonna cost you a fortune. Your GI Bill and all that, you're gonna have to reinstitute that, nobody's gonna do that.
and we had a different mindset also.
Oh, patriotism, yeah.
Men
we're in
were
the deep.
willing to give their lives for this country. Right now, our government's been telling, teenagers that this government's not worth fighting for.
That this country is
That
not
this
worth fighting
country
for.
is not worth fighting for, and the Constitution is not worth fighting
Well, the
for.
Vietnam War changed all that. that conflict was, the whole country was against that. And they had all these benefits they were giving the GIs. They took them all away when I got in. They took the GI Bill away altogether except for one little thing. And they're gonna have to put that back in to get folks to, because they yanked them out of I was part of that. They yanked them out of colleges. They took them off the street, and there was all this unfairness thing that was, and people were demonstrating on college campuses. That's what you're gonna have again if you start the draft.
My band director in the 9th grade, it was his second year of teaching, and he was gonna be drafted. He would have joined, if you drafted, you served 2 years. If you joined, you served 4, but you got to pick what you wanted to do versus drafting. You went straight to Vietnam.
Right.
And the thing is too, they went over there in a war that was never gonna be won. And is that what Ukraine is? You know, constant conflict.
Well, you have to have, since right now we have a voluntary service, you have to give somebody benefits. You have to be able to pull them in.
They'd have to restore all them that Jimmy Carter took away. He what?
Because right now you don't have that sense of pride. I mean, back in the 80s, you know, who all remembers Rocky, you know, up against, you know, the Russian, you know,
The
was all
Russian
up there
hockey team and schools let out when we won
It
the
was
gold, you know?
such a different story.
Yeah.
You know, people were willing to fight for a country that they loved and that they were proud of. But our country is just not there right now. We're not teaching our children that sense of pride and
Because
honor and
everybody's a
sacrifice.
winner. You're confusing them about their gender. I mean, you know what's gonna happen? Even if they try to enforce the draft, all these mamas are gonna run somewhere else with their kids. Because they're not raising them properly, they're not tough anymore. Everybody's a winner, everybody gets a trophy. Oh, you poor thing. You know, back in the day, when, you know, Pearl Harbor got bombed, all these men, they weren't even old enough to go in, and they lied and they went in. They were tough, they were men. We're not raising those kind of people now. We're confusing them
raising
about
girls.
who they are. They don't know if they're girls or boys.
Hard times make hard men.
Awful, awful.
Easy times.
What has worked well in other countries is mandatory military. Everybody at the age of 18, every man and every woman goes in 2 years.
Yep.
That way you have invested in your country. You feel as though you're part of it.
Right.
And it makes a huge difference. We don't seem to have the courage to even think about something like that.
But with the United States, it got everybody's back. They don't have to worry about fighting because we come in and do it. So it's,
I don't mind paying for someone's college if they put in a few years in the military. You know, then yeah.
You're paying for more though, because you're paying for their health care after they get out and.
Not if they go in for 2 years, no.
They're eligible for the VA
Eligible for
unless
VA.
you retire, but,
Well, that ain't cheap.
No.
The VA benefit, yeah, I've seen that. I'm eligible for all that. That's costing a fortune. Look at all these, go up there to the VA hospital, look what's going on.
Oh, that's why my husband don't go there.
Thanks to Mr. Trump, we got some of that fixed.
they finally shone a light on how horrible the system was
Yeah,
and how
people
we
were
were on,
dying.
yeah.
After a couple of years in the military, people on the GI Bill do far better in college. They make
Oh, yeah.
far
Oh, yeah, they
better
do.
students
Yeah, they do.
they
than what's there now.
Oh, you appreciate it. You appreciate it because you fought for that. You earned
That's right.
that. I paid my way through college, and I absolutely made sure I made the best grades, and I took advantage of every opportunity because I was paying for that. So it's a little bit different, I think, if you're coming out at 18, you don't know what you want to do, you know, your parents are paying for it. I went through, you know, college, and you know, kids were taking out these student loans and just taking the max out and just blowing it. going out partying, and they're like, hey, it's left over from my, I'm like, you have to pay that back one of these days, It's not free money.
They knew Biden was gonna.
They figured Biden was gonna get in there and give them, the free student loan payback, but, we're not teaching our children proper respect of money, to understand what it's like, to earn a hard day's pay. But when you see the Federal Reserve that's just printing money, just going crazy, with monetary easing and just, below zero interest rates, making it, just easy for you to get money and not actually having to be sensible with money. That's what we've been teaching our children, and we're teaching them the wrong attributes. We should be teaching them to be frugal and to save and to be patriotic and to be good citizens and to be, helpful in their communities. We're seeing the destruction of our communities because people get this sense that the government's going to come in and save the day. It didn't used to be like that. It used to be the community would rally behind people, churches, families. You would have multi-generational families that would live together, and then for some reason it came to be where, you can't live with your parents. It makes sense, to have multi-generational families. So the older grandparents can take care of the younger kids. You don't have to worry about putting them into daycare. We just have gotten so far away from our Christian values where, this pride in our community and helping others, and giving people a hand up instead of just continually giving them hands out. Because if you don't ever teach people how to take care of themselves, how sad is that when you just wake up and the government's giving this, it's for free, it's good enough. Do you want good enough? Do you want the government to control every aspect of your life? Or do you want to have that pride and get up every day and say, I'm contributing to my community, I'm providing for my family, I'm teaching my children respect and how they can continue to contribute to society and make this world a better place, because we're just not getting that right now. And we need to get that back. And we need people that are willing to step up and say, these are my values. And I think this is most everybody's values, that we want our children to be proud of this nation again. We want our children to have the opportunity to prosper and to be safe and to know that no matter what color of their skin is, no matter what side of the tracks they grow up on, that they were blessed by God and lucky enough to be born as American citizens, that just by that grace, you have the opportunity to do anything you want, to be anything you want, to make your American dream come true. Because none of us have the same American dream. Nobody in this room wants the same thing. My dream looks totally different from your dream, and that's okay, because this is the United States of America, and the government doesn't tell us where we have to work or where we have to live, or that house is good enough for you, or that car is good enough for you, or you don't get a car, you have to take public transportation, because that's where our government is trying to go. They're wanting to put all of us in a box and say, this is what you get, and the government controls everything. And that's not what this country was founded upon. This country was founded upon the freedom and the liberty for all of us to decide. And this government was supposed to give us all that opportunity to make our own decisions.
This is gonna sound sexist. How does a mom with young children handle Congress?
Elise Stefanik, she is the third in charge in Congress. She had a baby in Congress. She made it work. And I heard that when I was a police officer. When I was being hired, the people that were hiring me, the board, asked what did my husband think about it? Would they ask a man the same thing? Would they ask a man, what does your wife think about it? What happens if you have children? You just know that you make it work. I have a wonderful husband, 3 wonderful boys, and as a family, we just make it work because it's what we all want as a family. And my decision to run for Congress is just important as a man's decision to run for Congress. And being a mother should not ever be, should not ever hold me back, because I will be the best Congress person, the best, I just say congressman, I'm sorry, I don't ever say congresswoman. I was a policeman, I'll be a congressman, it is what it is. I will be the best congressman, regardless of what sex I am, just because I'm dedicated, I'm motivated. I just want to make a difference. I just want to make a better.
Women are better at multitasking.
Very
anyway.
good. You just make it work. You
Make
have
it
20
work.
gazillion things going on,
Oh, now
and you
that's
just make
not-
it work.
We just have to make it work.
Emergency manager for the state judicial branch during COVID. I had, preemie twins when I was getting my master's degree. I was literally breastfeeding and writing papers, and you just make it work because that's just what moms do. That's what women do. And if it's important to you, you make it work. And I must say, my husband he's wonderful. When I told him I was going to run for Congress, he just looked at me and said, "Of course you are." So I mean, he never once even thought anything of it. It was just totally normal to him because I've always kind of had a different trajectory. I've always just set my mind to something, and I've always just done it. And I've always just had that sense of public service and helping others, and that's just who I am. To the core of my being, that's just what I knew I was put on this earth to do. I just knew it. I knew that's what my calling was to help others. And it's gone from police officer to emergency manager to being a congressman. So I just know that's where I can best utilize my skills and abilities and training to help others. Does anybody else have any questions? Yes, ma'am.
What can be done into the school situation about the way we hire teachers? Why aren't they looked at as some of the, a little closer, or how they think, or what their beliefs are, and things of this sort?
I don't even know what you could, in an interview, there's typically only certain questions you can ask. I know when I was being hired as a police officer, I had to go through, background checks and psych evaluations and that, because, I was tasked with, obviously, with a weapon and potentially taking somebody's lives. But as a teacher, I don't know what personal questions you can ask about them. I don't even know if they can ask about ideology. Because typically,
Under circumstances, don't you think it's time to change that?
yeah, because typically you would think you're hired upon your credentials, based upon, where you got your teaching certifications. But, a lot of places are now starting to look at social media. So you can evaluate somebody. However, that being said, a lot of the administrators are right along that line. So the administrators that are doing the hiring, if they have that same left-leaning ideology, then of course they're going to hire those left-leaning teachers.
Yeah.
So where does that start?
That goes back to each individual county, Board of
The county?
Educations,
And not the
and
state?
they're probably the administrators that they're hiring at the county level, because they're the ones that are doing the hiring of the teachers.
And it's the school board who hires the superintendent.
There you
so-
go. So this is where you need to be active at the local level.
I think all of that needs to be reevaluated from what it used to be.
And like I said, we didn't know
I mean, it's just like.
years
we
ago
were
that this
talking
was
about-
going on.
Yeah, the police and the military and, I mean, everything's being relooked at.
Yeah.
Why aren't teachers being relooked at? And to my
And-
knowledge, they're not. I mean, I know the school boards, well, should have some control over that if it's done right because they're elected.
For one thing, we're short of teachers.
Does the name Randy Weingartner ring a bell?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, she wants to get rid of the Second Amendment totally now.
There's your big
She
problem
does.
right there.
Get rid of the guns and the Second Amendment.
Yes, sir.
Well, I guess I'm going to be the odd man out. I think the federal government needs to get out of education. I think it's a state's matter. What is your opinion? Should we have a Department of Education at the federal level?
I have heard two different trains of thought on it. Because with the Department of Education, if you have a state that doesn't have the money or the assets to provide for children, that they can come in at the federal level to help out. However, that being said, now you're beholden to the federal government on how you run things at the local level. We've always said that government is best served at the local level. So how does the government in DC know what's best in North Carolina and Eastern North Carolina? So how do they know what's best serving the children in this area? They don't. So I have always thought that if you could eradicate a portion of the government, the Department of Education would be a place to start. I mean, could you imagine how much money you can, because the bigger it is, the further away it is, the less oversight there is, the less transparency there is. There's so much more oversight, transparency when it's all at the local level.
The problem is you can get rid of the federal government out of education. You can do that easy. Problem is, the federal money goes with it. State
Yes.
ain't never gonna go with it.
Well, that's okay, because walk down to our offices here at the local level, and you're going to discover there's more money going into administration than there is into the
To
teachers.
fill out the paperwork for the federal money.
Well, yeah, but you ain't gonna get that federal money, and you people up there in the state house ain't never gonna go for
Well,
that.
who wants that money?
The state, people in the state house, ask them.
In their salaries.
But, I mean,
That
I made a discovery one day. I was over at the Blackwell Church, and this woman told me she was going to work in the portables behind Northeastern High School. Now, I'm not saying this woman doesn't work, I'm sure she does, but I was questioning, why do we need that administration in that role? Well, then, I said something to my son, who happens to be a teacher at Elizabeth City Middle School, and he says, well, that's nothing. He says, when they built the new Elizabeth City Middle School, they built 2 sets of offices, not for that school, but for the whole county-wide school system, right? It's embedded. And I'm saying, do we need, I'm not saying those people aren't working, you said it well. But I think maybe we need to slim the diet, and there ought to be, and I've asked people about this whole administration cost. I mean, why are we spending so much money in administration rather than giving it to the teachers, so you got these teachers buying supplies out of their own pocket?
That's right.
And I think we need less administrators and put some money into the educators. They're not exactly getting wealthy.
It's funny how Biden says that in the economy, he's not for the trickle-down effect. But when you're talking about Department of Education, which is bloated, all of, that the money is at the top. And then it's supposed to somehow trickle down to the teachers. It's bad when you're talking about a free market economy, but supposedly it's good when you're talking about the Department of Education. Our children are the ones that are suffering. Our teachers, like you said, are having to come out of their pocket. We have these, these supply drives in all these counties that, fill the bus,
We
and
have
do
a
this
lot
and
of
do that.
Yeah, adopt a school.
Yeah, just so
Yeah.
you can get teachers to give supplies. I'm like, why are they beg, borrowing, stealing, coming out of their own
Particularly when
pocket?
they're in North Carolina, $2 million is given to education every year.
And how much are the administrators getting?
Well, I don't know. It's
So,
just like
and how many
it's like
people have a
when people do
DEI
budgets.
person
Yeah,
now?
that's
Get rid of the
state-
diversity,
that's state
equity,
law. We
inclusion.
just-
Yeah, look at all the
State law.
budgets that people do in states and counties and cities, and if you don't spend it, then next year you won't get it, they'll withhold it, so then
It's always
everybody
like
just
that.
spends it however, it's like a free fall.
You don't reward efficiency. So when I've asked the person in the state legislature about it, his response to me, and he was at that time the chairman of that department here in Raleigh, and basically says that'd be micromanaging. Well, maybe some micromanaging is needed. And, but I'm afraid, Randy, if there was no Department of Education, Randy Weingard would have lost a lot of her platform.
Yeah, she would have.
And so that's how you cut it out completely. Now, here in North Carolina, the state does run the education system. Not every state's that way, but we're here. And I think we need to get rid of bloated executive type things. It's not enough to have that building over there on Halsted Boulevard. Then there's a whole bunch of portables behind there. And then you go over behind Northeastern High School, when they built when they separated the schools, they didn't get rid of those portables, they put administrators in those rooms. And now, that's still not enough, so now they built a brand new school and they're putting system administrators in the local schools. Somebody needs to call a halt to that, and the federal government's not gonna do it, because they're the ones that are creating, if you do all this and this, we're gonna give you this money. Well, money, you know, a transfusion from the government, it's like having a transfusion from doctor, you're a good one. It's having a transfusion from one arm to the other arm, with the government getting 95% of it all the way across.
And it's so hard once you have these systems in place, you have these safety nets, you have these programs, people get used to the way it is. It's so hard to draw it back down.
And we're, a big part of our meal is we're feeding kids breakfast, lunch, and dinner. Now, these parents get WIC, food stamps. I mean, I thought that's what that was for, but they can go with their food stamps and they buy steak while I buy hot dogs. And we're rewarding bad behavior. I've come in here, I haven't been here for months, and I better shut up and go home.
Well, we would agree with you, but the problem is it starts at the voting booth. If these people, 81 million people voted for this, if you can't get them to vote the right way, we're
She lost
talking.
my vote. She
Well,
knows how I
yeah,
feel.
but she's only one person.
Would you support term limits?
And for me, I would want to take, I would think maybe 3 terms in Congress, and then I can take that experience and do something else. And better use those abilities, skills somewhere else. Because we've all seen that if you stay in one area too long, you stagnate. You just get used to it, you just are cruising, and you don't have any reason to think outside the box or to actually innovate, because you just know that, hey,
Pelosi, perfect
it's
example.
good enough. Well, if you know you have a limited time to get what you want done, to make your mark, to improve lives and to create legislation, are you not going to work that much harder? So, and then after, say, 6 years I'm in Congress, then I can run for Senate, or I can run for governor, and I can take all that ability and skills and the training that I learned there and use that, and then step in another direction. I can still continue to provide and support North Carolina, just in a different capacity. I don't have to be in Congress.
I'm taking a phone call. I'm not mad at you.
But you do. If you get stuck in one place, you stagnate. I think you have to continue to make yourself better, to improve, to learn new skills, so you can make yourself better able to serve the people of North Carolina.
I'm gonna see how you feel about this. So today was a big day in the House and Senate. There was a lot of bills that were heard today, a lot of live streams that were going on. One of the bills that they were supposed to hear today, I think I don't know, they pushed it off. It's gotten moved on the calendar. It's the H314. This is a bill requiring that all school administrative employees, all teachers basically, would be required to go through 2 hours of ethics training. And it stipulates that the training should be provided by the UNC School of Government or another qualified source, and to be completed within 6 months of the date this act becomes law. And if they're initially being hired, it would be within 90 days. Does the House need to be telling our teachers to go through ethics training? Is that?
You know, the whole
The House needs to go
micromanaging,
through some ethics training.
you would think that you would learn ethics in college.
Yeah, it might not be the ethics
Another
we're
teacher
thinking.
would-
Right,
I know,
right.
that's exactly.
So I
it's
don't know
not.
if they're trying to jump in and undo the DEI stuff. Is it like a rebuttal?
It's past the first reading in the House. They were
So-
supposed to do the second reading today. I don't know what
Who
happened, but
sponsored
they
it,
moved it.
Republicans or Democrats?
It's a bipartisan bill, interestingly enough. Great.
It's, the only thing I can think of is kind of a rebuttal to the DEI, which I don't think the DEI, diversity, equity, inclusion, belongs in any of it either. I don't think the government should be mandating any of that either. But it's overreach. Why is this not at the local level? If you think that you should learn ethics training, then it should be in your curriculum, getting your teacher certification. It shouldn't be
Right,
Congress.
right.
We should all learn ethics. We should all have ethics and morals and values. And, we should all have, learn about the Constitution and civic engagement, and being a good, upstanding citizen. We should have all learned that in college. So Congress coming in after the fact trying to teach that is a little interesting to me. So.
Sloan Rockmuth with Education First Alliance had previously said that particular bill was the public school ethics, that it was just another way they're getting CRT into the schools.
Yes.
They're
Yeah, that's what I
ingraining in the
figured.
teachers.
So obviously, whose ethics?
Yeah.
Right.
It's always
Right.
who's pushing their ethics, and
I don't know what kind of ethics will come out of UNC Chapel Hill, but that's what they're looking at, trying to get them to teach the
We need to point out
teachers.
that at Elizabeth City State, though, when their diversity leader who was hired, was dividing up whites,
Yes.
blacks, and how they were gonna get their emails, they wanted her fired. The students wanted her
Yeah.
fired. They did not want to be separated.
That actually happened in Elizabeth City.
Yes.
Our
Yes,
our
just
chancellor of
recently.
the school.
what is the
made a-
reasoning behind that?
They tried to segregate the students.
Why? I mean, what is the reasoning? Just more divisiveness.
Right.
I think she said she thought that they would feel more comfortable.
When
Being
when did we ever guarantee people that life was comfortable? I'm sorry, but life is challenging. You're gonna be upset. You can't live in a bubble, a safe space throughout your entire life. You're gonna be uncomfortable, and if you can't handle being included with other races in an email, what happens when you are faced with a serious challenge in
Well,
life?
obviously
You
weren't
have to have a
comfortable if
safe
they wanted
room
to
and
go
a safety
fired.
pin.
They were comfortable with what they had, which makes sense to me.
It's got.
I was proud of them for
Yeah.
fighting back, yes.
He wasn't the worst president in history, but he was the most corrupt. In fact, I was horrified.
Now, the most corrupt is in office now.
Well, no, he was more corrupt. This guy was awful. He made J.R. Ewing look like Captain Kangaroo. I'm not kidding you. This guy was horrible. This thing where they say the election was stolen, well, we know what happened. And what they did was after midnight, they stopped the counting. Remember that? And then they started counting early in the morning, and then we woke up and we had more votes and we knew what to do with it. This is not new. Lyndon Baines Johnson won all of his elections like that. What his campaign would do is they would, in the middle of the night, or 9, 10 o'clock, they'd stop counting, but they'd say, oh, we're gonna keep counting, we're gonna count votes. And the courts let him do it. So what he did, you'd wake up the next morning and all these votes were brought in illegally, we know now that they were, And Lyndon Johnson won all his election, like he won his Senate, his Congress, anything he ran for. And he won his presidential election like that. So what we had in the 2020 election is nothing new. It's an old Lyndon Baines Johnson trick. So now I'm being told that Donald Trump could have done something about that when he had the House and Congress, because he could have put some restrictions on the way they did that. I think Wayne Allen Root told him he could do it, and he talked about it, but he didn't do anything. And then he lost the House and the Senate, and they said, Wayne Allen Root told him he could do it by executive order or fiat, and he didn't do anything. So they're telling me he could. Do you know whether the Congress can stop, what they'd have to do is stop mail-in voting, except for, that's what killed him, the mail-in voting, that was corrupt, and he knew it. But they say that Congress can do something about that in a federal election. They can't do anything in the state, but they do have some leeway in the federal election, and they can also they can also determine when the polls close. Okay, you close at 9 o'clock, that's it. You don't count the votes up till midnight, then you stop, that's it. That's how they cheat and win these elections. I've been told that the Congress can do something about that in a federal election, even the president can. If they can, we'll have fair elections again. But if they can't, they're gonna have the old
whole
What
thing
you're
is
doing
we
here-
don't want to federalize elections.
Right,
We
exactly.
want each individual state
Yes.
to be in control of their elections. Nobody anticipated COVID. So COVID gave them the opportunity to create these rules and regulations for the public health emergency. Nobody ever saw that coming. So, as we always hear, you never let a crisis go to
Well, they
waste.
should have, because LBJ did it back in 65, or
That's right.
65, he did it, so they should have saw it coming,
So
because he did the
they-
exact same thing.
They used
The
COVID,
Democrats have always done it.
That's right.
so
It's
they are
nothing new.
really good.
Keep in mind one thing, they won't prosecute voter fraud.
Well, that's-
We had a Elizabeth City State student, and during that year, they were not allowed to be on campus. In September, the very 1st of September, she asked for an absentee ballot. It went to her home in Atlanta, Georgia. The Friday, her election day was on Tuesday, her ballot came in on Friday, which was under the guidelines, they actually extended it that year. Her ballot came in on Friday, the next Monday, and keep in mind, there was another Georgia election coming up in January that she wanted to vote in.
Did she vote in 2 states?
Well, she changed her registration the Monday after Election Day to that address in Georgia,
Okay, if she voted in 2
I-
states, that is a crime.
No, but she wasn't living here at the time. She couldn't live in the dorms when they were closed.
Right,
She
that's
was
right.
living at her home.
Right.
I had all the information. She was not the only one. We had 4 like that. The district attorney would not even look at it. It has to, well, number one, the district attorney can. It also goes, all election cases goes to the district attorney in Wake County by law in North Carolina. Now, why would it go to the district attorney in the Democrat county of Wake County, where there is no Republican DA? But even then, our Republican DA, they don't want to touch election fraud cases.
Well, I mean, students in college, if they're voting here, their parents should not be able to take them on their taxes as,
Well,
It depends.
if North Carolina law allows, if they say that they're gonna stay here, that they can use that address. We know that that's not
but
always
of
the
course
case.
the
But
parents.
she literally had moved back home
But
the
I mean,
senior
a
year.
parent, if a student claims this as their residence, then,
They shouldn't be able to take it as a dependent.
yeah, they're not
Right.
living with their parents.
But guess who's paying the bill?
Yeah, that's right.
But there has been precedent cases on that, so they allow, in North Carolina, and keep in mind, every state has different laws.
Going back to what you were talking about, federalizing elections, it's a slippery slope, because the Democrats are trying to pass the John Lewis Voting Rights Act, saying that, we're discriminating against African Americans and
Right.
asking for
The voter
voter
ID
ID and all that
yeah.
stuff. So whoever is in power will be able to tweak the voting rights in their favor. So that's why we want to leave it up to the states. So the federal government doesn't have that overarching power across the entire country.
But there was a coordinated effort underground to do what LBJ did and all these Democrats and these things.
Oh, they have it down pat.
Yeah, they got it. And they, yeah, and the guy with the 2,000 mule, he kind of proved what they did.
Oh, yeah.
But now I found out that this last election, the Republicans have started doing that. They were stuffing the ballot boxes out in California, just like, so now it goes both ways.
Yeah.
Now the conservatives are doing it.
Because we are starting to say where it's legal to ballot harvest, we have to play the same game that the Democrats
Yeah,
are.
and
So
that's
as
what we
long
did.
as it's legal, then we have to take the same initiative to beat them at their own game. So if we can ballot harvest, and you can do that, because we can't just assume that the Democrats are play nicely, because you know they're not.
No, they're
So
not.
if they're doing it, then we have to do the same thing.
But we need to get about $500 million to fund that, like the Facebook guy did. He put $500 million into that to hire these
The sucker
navigators
boxes.
to go around door to door to these houses and help people vote. Now, that's how they got the election. That's what actually, and there's nothing illegal about that. He and some other people put money into it, but they went to, they did, that. What they did was equivalent to electioneering in homes. You can't do that at polls, but they did it in these homes.
And you can do it here.
Yeah, you can do it anywhere.
I can go to any of my neighbors, and usually I'll say, do you
Yes, you
need
can.
do you need an absentee ballot? Do you need a ride to the polls? Do you know that you can get an absentee ballot and what you have to do? And there's no reason
right.
that I can't go over there if they ask me for
That's
help.
right.
Now, you're not supposed to do it in a nursing home, but we know it gets done.
Yeah.
But see, you've got this guy from Facebook putting all his money into it, and you don't have all that money on the other side, so it's lopsided there, but it's legal right now. But they could pass a law against that. That's electioneering.
But you can't police it. I'm not gonna tell you who comes into my home. And plus, you have to have a witness for your absentee ballot. Someone's gotta watch you sign your name on it.
Right. Well, that's how they won the election, that way. And that's perfectly legal.
Listen, we gotta get down and dirty.
Yep, these heavy Democratic things is where they went in.
But keep in mind, Pasquotank went red this past election.
Mm-hmm.
That's right.
In spite of the fact that certain groups were busing people in, giving them quote-unquote sample ballots and feeding them their meal,
We give them sample ballots.
did you not hear my next sentence?
You're not supposed to give them anything of monetary value,
Well,
then
if
that's
you
fine
Well,
to vote.
it's monetary value after the vote. It's after the vote. Like
It's a
Elizabeth
gray
said.
area.
You had to
Democrats
have
are
a
really
That's
good
right.
at playing in the gray.
Yeah.
You had to have a coin or a ticket,
Well, why in the world should a church, which is tax exempt, I speak as one that's been part of the church world for over 50 years, should not be using church buses, which are funded by tax exempt contributions, should not be involved in political maneuvering. I think it ought to be, it's morally wrong and it ought to be legally wrong.
Well, they can lose their tax exempt status, but again, nobody's gonna do it.
Right.
Well, because it all seems to be going one way and you don't go that way.
I'll bet you if you ask a Republican to lead it, he wouldn't do it. That's been Republicans are slow to call down the other team.
They did.
Well, the minute you
Yeah,
do it, they
that's right.
scream racism at you.
Well, I think
Yeah,
a
they
lot
do.
of the Republican leaning, especially churches during Lois Lerner with the IRS, when they started going after tax exempt status of Republicans, they learned not to try any of those things. Democrats knew that the Democrats were in control of the IRS. Lois Lerner was never adjudicated, she was just let off. But, they were targeting Republican tax exempt status
What can be done about the career Democrats that have worked in all different facets of government in DC? That's the problem.
You're talking about the deep state.
The deep state. The deep state. I mean, they control stuff.
Yeah. They know that elected officials come and go. Who stays in these 20-year careers with a lot of the power?
The ones who know where the dead bodies are buried.
The administration. Hence the deep state. And a lot of elected officials are hesitant to take them on head to head. I mean, we've seen the repercussions that Trump is facing right now because he went up against the deep state and they're trying, I mean, typically the criminal justice system is supposed to have a crime and go find out who committed the crime. In this case, they have the person and they're trying to fit the crime, any crime, to fit that person. It's not the way the judicial system is supposed to work. When you have these people in these administrative positions for 20 years, they have a lot of leverage. And it's very hard. Obviously Trump wanted to shake things up and he just did not have enough time to drain the swamp. So obviously we need to continue where that was started, and it's not been finished.
Part of that swamp was in his backyard, and he didn't know it. You had Liz Cheney, Kinzinger, and now Tom Tillis is in that swamp. We're gonna vote him out because we put him in there to replace Kay Hagan. We thought he'd do a better job, and now he's turned, stabbed us all in the back. So we're gonna vote him out next time.
So we need to just clean house from the top down. It's just very hard when you have these people in these positions. They're dug in like ticks, and it's just trying to root them out, find out where there's corruption, because in various agencies there's corruption. You just have to, and the majority of people I think are wanting to do the right thing, but you have people in these key positions that have been there for decades, and those are the people that we need to get rid of to actually see meaningful change across this.
You mean like the FBI?
Yeah, I mean, the rank and file FBI agent are good people. They joined the FBI because they want to make a difference. They want to help people. They're not the problem.
But
it's the administration that's the problem.
It's been like that since J. Edgar Hoover.
Yeah.
He was one of the most corrupt people in Washington, D.C., and him and LBJ were best friends. I'm horrified to read about what was going on behind the scenes that we now know.
Yeah, so I would never say defund. We can't defund. We need our agencies. We need our law enforcement. Because like I said, the majority of people want to do the right thing. They want to get this country back on the right track. They want us to be that strong nation, that safe nation. You just have some people in key areas that are in it for some other reason, whether it's for their own personal financial gain or for power. Those are the people that we need to shine that light on, and we need to get rid of those people to actually see the change that we need to see to move this country forward. And it's no easy feat, but it's going to take Congress to come in with their oversight, which has been sorely lacking, and we need congressmen that will literally hold some feet to the fire and get the change. Because Congress has they've just let it go. They're like, eh.
They need to get that border under control.
Oh, yeah.
It's getting really bad now. People coming in here and they're giving them driver's licenses and things now, and so you're gonna have illegal people that are here illegal will be voting, and give them a driver like that lets them do anything.
Well, it used to be for asylum status, you had to go to a legal port of entry.
And you still do, that's still.
But they
law.
don't anymore. They just go wherever, and they just don't have the manpower to actually adjudicate. They don't have enough judges. They don't have enough people to actually adjudicate their asylum claim. And they've all been coached. They all know what to say. So they all say that they have a credible fear of whatever, repercussion in their own country. So we're just letting everybody in. In the meantime, they're getting legal status to work. So like you said, they're putting their kids into our schools. So we're getting overcrowding at schools. They're all going to emergency rooms. They're getting free medical. They all have to get housing someplace. They're going someplace to live. We already have a housing crisis across this country. So it's only compounding upon these issues with inflation out of control, because we just see these communities that are just throwing money at illegals when we don't even have the money to support people that are already here. So until we get the cycle under control, it's going to get worse before it gets better. And I don't see the desire, obviously, in the Biden administration to stop it. So until we force him as a people to do something about it, who's gonna make him change? Who's gonna actually make him enforce immigration law? Because he's just been thumbing his nose at it. There is immigration law in the books, and he's just ignoring it. So how are you, as the President of the United States, who is supposed to follow the Constitution, all the laws of the land, just knowingly ignoring the law? He's ignoring the Constitution, and he does not feel like he has anybody that he is beholden to, that he's not accountable to. He is just acting as if presidential authority, he gets to pick and choose which laws he's going to enforce and which laws he's not. And that's not the way the Constitution or our government is set up. You are a president, you're not a king for a reason. And he's acting like he has that authority to just ignore the other branches of government. And so we need to reel him back in and say there's a Constitution for a reason. There's these guardrails that you're supposed to be following that he's been ignoring. And for too long he's been just saying, well, I don't think I have the authority, but I'm going to do it anyway. I'm going to wait for the courts to come back, SCOTUS to come back and tell me I can't do it. That's not the way it's supposed to work. You're supposed to have the authority by the Constitution to do these sort of things, but he knows right now no one's going to hold him accountable. And it's incumbent upon all of us to pick representations that will hold him accountable. Because otherwise nothing's going to change. We need strong leaders that will speak for the Constitution.
I want to just say thank you so much for coming out here, because isn't it refreshing, you guys, to hear a congressional candidate that has some substance, that actually can ask some answers
Well, she had
to the
some
questions.
really good reasoning and answers to why we should vote for her.
We've heard a lot of candidates speak, and people in this room are pretty educated to ask a lot of very specific questions. So you did a fantastic job.
And I love it. I mean, that's why I'm not perfect. I don't know everything. I will never, ever say that I know everything. But I try to be educated. And, I'm going to be representing you all. So I want to be knowledgeable and be able to bring, like I said, my education and skills to the table, because I'm your asset. I want to do the best job that I can to help improve lives. So if I'm not making myself the best that I can be by educating myself and being knowledgeable about these really hard issues, then I'm doing everybody a disservice.